What are the challenges when promoting cycling in the cities of today?
I think the most important urban challenge that we face currently to cycling is to make cycling an integral part of the urban culture in cities around the world. That's the next big thing, to really make a cycling culture. Any city can make a street, and most cities can manage to get cars from A to B. That can be done. Many cities also are able to make cycle lanes next to the streets. They're certainly not all well done when we look at them around the world, but it's achievable. But the most important challenge is really to make cycling a culture, an urban culture, something that is part of everyday life in a city. And only when you get to this stage you can really call yourself a cycling city, and only when you get to that stage you can harvest all of the benefits that cycling gives way to. I mean, health, improved mobility, environmental issues, and so on and so forth. So when we work with cities around the world to address cycling, we try to make them aware of the difference between hardware and software issues. We need a balanced approach to these things. Hardware, in a few words, is cycle lanes and all the physical infrastructure, for example, that goes into making cycling possible. Software is more the notion of cycling and the awareness of cycling, and both these notions, both these issues, the hardware and the software, need to be addressed by the cities if they want to really make a change with cycling. And to create a cycling culture like the one you see in Copenhagen takes quite a while, and it certainly takes a balanced approach to these things.
And what is being done specifically in Copenhagen to promote cycling?
Copenhagen is a cycling city. It has a cycling culture, and it's probably one of the world's best cities in terms of cycling now. And due to decades of work, Copenhagen really harvests all the benefits now that I spoke about, the environmental, the health and the mobility issues, to name but a few. But even if Copenhagen has worked on this for decades, the city continues to develop new strategies and implement them to further promote cycling and increase the cycling culture as a phenomenon in the city. And examples of that could be to continue, and this is really important, continue to connect the network of cycle paths and tracks around the city. You can do that by bridges. We've seen fine examples in Copenhagen of that, giving cyclists the opportunity to cross heavy traffic without obstruction. So you bring them across big streets that a city also needs, but that is really difficult to cross if you're on a bike without interrupting the flow of traffic terribly. We've seen implementation and building of bridges that create all new patterns of movement in the city and that really make cycling a true alternative to almost any form of mobility in terms of speed and practicality. I think also in Copenhagen the collaboration between the city and the railway services and the metro services to get cycles on and off trains and to make that easy is a really good example of some of the issues that Copenhagen is promoting. And then maybe an example of the software issue, the biannual Copenhagen Cycle Account, which really is a state of the nation of cycling in Copenhagen, helps to promote the knowledge and the awareness of cycling and also sets new targets for the city. I think is a fine example of some of the things that Copenhagen does.
And what problems remain unsolved with regards to cycling in Copenhagen?
Well, in many cities, cycling today is received favorably, but we have to remember that it's a very recent phenomenon, as it were. Only a few years back, it was left to a few cities in Europe to really be moving in that direction of making cycling a true part of the culture. Amsterdam and Copenhagen have been at it for decades. But today we see that cities like New York or Munich or Melbourne or Sydney are promoting policies also that allow cycling to become an integral part of the mobility. So things are moving in the right direction, but I think we have a huge global responsibility, and that's one of the things I think we need to push. If we want to inherit a planet to our children that is really sustainable, we need more cities around the world to take on a more sustainable approach to mobility. And one of the big issues, I think, is promoting cycling in the megacities of the developing world. I think we have a mutual responsibility to try and promote that. The issue being that in many of these cities, as it was the case in our own part of the world, there is a strong link between individual status and car ownership, and that means that cultures that were cycling cultures are moving away from the cycle. We see that in India and China and so on, and that constitutes, of course, a great problem for these societies, and we really need to promote this awareness of the potential of cycling. Cities like Copenhagen can do that. Indeed, consultants like ourselves need to be part of that, and we're currently engaged in megacities in China, India, Brazil, and Mexico to try and advance that. So I think that's one of the big issues, I'd say, that we still need to promote a cycling culture in many cities around the world to really make this happen. We do it through education and capacity building and pilot projects, and we certainly do it by telling the story about cycling city number 1 in the world, Copenhagen, when we travel. And that's an important tool in convincing mayors and politicians that it can be done. Copenhagen shows it can be done.